Hey guys, welcome to the start of exam number 2. And we're going to start out with the first part that we're going to cover, which is the integumentary system, which is just a fancy name for the skin and all the different organs that sort of help support the skin, like create oil and help sense things. So we'll kind of cut this chapter into a couple of different sections. But with the start of the integumentary system, the functions of the skin would be to protect us from things that want to come inside of us and attack us, make it so we don't evaporate all the water, protect us. They serve as an immune system, but we'll cover that in a minute or two. It's mainly made up of 3 layers. The 2 that are considered to be part of the skin are going to be the epidermis and the dermis. And you probably have sophomoric friends or me and would go ahead and find something like this funny. Your epidermis is showing, which is just your outer skin layer. Your dermis would be under that one. That kind of makes the epidermis layer and supports it. And then below that would be the hypodermis, which is fat and some connective tissue, so it connects the skin to basically the muscles and things like that. We'll discuss skin color and how it's produced due to these special cells and what they secrete. And then later in this chapter, we'll discover hairs and nails, what kind of structures are they, and then different types of glands that either support the skin or help support our immune system, like oils and things like that. But the overall of our skin is basically, it's going to be the largest and heaviest organ in our body. It's about 16% of your body weight, 16 to 18%. So in an average person, it's going to be at least 25 pounds of just skin that you have. The cutaneous membrane is going to consist of the other things that are connected to the skin, like hair, nails, and we'll discuss how they're actually made and how they're supported with the tissues or the glands that help support them. But the skin, we really don't think about it, but they have a lot of functions. They do protection, so there's a chemical barrier. Skin is actually a really low pH. And because of the low pH, it sort of inhibits a lot of bacterial growth. It only makes it so some bacteria can live there, and that bacteria is very competitive. So when bad bacteria do land on it, they do just attack it and kill it. The other thing that we're going to talk about is sebum. Sebum is an oil, and basically it's an antibacterial, and it's even shown some antifungal properties, and it kills bacterium. And if you think about areas that get oily on you, they're going to be like your face, your hair, the back of your neck. Those areas are definitely going to be high in sebum compared to other spots of your body. It's a physical barrier. It makes this thing called keratin, which is a hard protein, and lipids. And basically, they're designed to keep us waterproof, so they block water, anything that can come into our body, so we don't just expand, so it makes that. Melanin is going to shield the nuclei of cells to prevent UV damage. UV light actually does damage our DNA. We have some repair mechanisms that help that, but when you spend too much time in the sun, your DNA starts to take a major hit, and eventually that becomes skin cancer. And then biological barriers. So we're going to have some little cells that help us, like macrophages. They're designed so when they see these foreign bodies, they just kind of gulp them up and eat it. Dendritic cells, which we'll talk about soon, and some other immune functions that really do serve to protect us. To continue with the skin, we know that when you hit your skin with light, there's a mechanism that basically makes vitamin D, and it helps maintain the skeletal system, and vitamin D is really important for absorbing calcium into the body. And usually in the summer, this is for everybody, we kind of avoid going outside. I mean, especially in Phoenix, it's it's well above 100 degrees. It's sort of uncomfortable. In other areas, it's humid. So we don't get a lot of sunlight. So we have to supplement that by taking vitamin D pills. And vitamin D really do help with a lot of things. They help absorb calcium into the bones. They help absorb vitamin C into the rest of our body. We do have some parts of our skin that help with sensation. There are receptors for temperature, heat, cold. There's some for touch, and it can distinguish the difference between a light touch and a hard touch. There are some senses that do pressure, vibration, and even pain, and these are just going to be sensed up right to our brain to kind of give us an idea of what's going on, if something's hot or cold. Thermoregulation is probably something you thought about with the skin as well. Basically, we have sweat glands, and it's designed to evaporate that sweat in a really close proximity, and it makes it so that little close proximity area is cooler than the ambient temperature around us. And it's just because that water is starting to evaporate instantly and cools us down. We have this thing in our brain called the hypothalamus, and that's in charge of homeostasis, and basically it will help control sweat, and it also makes arteries and sweat glands activate. So sweat glands make sense. It makes it so you start to sweat out. And then arteries, what it does is it makes it so these capillaries get closer to the skin and basically act like a radiator to kind of make it so heat leaves our body through that mechanism. When it gets cold, it actually pulls some of those capillaries in, so it doesn't use them as much, so those get sort of not used. And that's why when you get cold, your skin starts to get blue. When you see people that are really starting to drop in temperature, like a lot, you'll see that their skin starts to turn blue, and what that is that the capillaries are starting to retreat back into the body to keep the core temperature cold. And deoxygenated blood, it's not blue, but it sort of is a darker color. And when we look at it through like skin and something like that, it kind of gives like a bluish tinge, but it definitely is a blue. It's just darker than oxygenated blood, which is a lighter red color. Excretion. Sweat does get rid of a lot of nitrogenous waste like urea, uric acid. A little bit of it is just going to kind of leave. Every day, regardless of the temperature, you lose about 0.5 liters of sweat. On a hot day, or if you exercise a lot, you can actually lose up to 3 gallons of sweat. And there's some areas that the sweat looks different than the others, and we'll talk about that soon. And then psychological and social functions. We don't really think about this, but when you get embarrassed, you have facial flush, which is just your face gets kind of red. Skin does make it for nonverbal communications with the blushing, and especially when you get mad, it sort of turns red as well. And we'll kind of discuss that too. The layers of the skin, and this is how I'm going to break down the next couple of recordings. The epidermis is going to be the most outer layer, and there's 5 different layers that kind of contribute to the epidermis. There's going to be this keratinized, stratified squamous epithelium. So the only new word here is going to be this, keratinized. This means it's going to be a harder structure. Stratified, we already know, means piles. Squamous epithelium. Epithelium is just skin cells. So we'll actually see that they're smushed epithelial cells, and sometimes we'll see layers and upon layers of this outer epidermis layer. So we just kind of call that one layer, but if you really look at it, it's sheets, and it could be something like 14, 15 sheets. It contains 5 major layers, and we'll kind of name them all and what they do. And then, of course, it's avascular, which means that it has to get its nutrients from the lower layer, which is called the dermis layer. And that is going to be the underlying layer. It's got some connective tissue. It's definitely vascularized. It's designed to do osmosis and diffusion up to the upper layers to kind of support them a little bit. And then, of course, it connects to the rest of the body. And then the hypodermis. The hypodermis is going to be the subcutaneous level. It's technically not skin, but we're going to talk about it because it does help protect. It gives a little cushioning. We have fat layers there, so that's our first area that we add fat. And then the rest of the fat is going to be either going to be for support in different positions of our body, or if you have excess of it. This is where we're going to have connective tissue connect to the muscle layers. So in our next video, we'll talk about the layers of the epidermis.